the next left onto Harlington Road West, A312. Continue on A312 for half a mile. In a quarter of a mile, keep left to continue on Fags Road. Keep left to continue on Fags Road. In a quarter of a mile, turn left onto Great Southwest Road, A30. Take the second left onto Great Southwest Road, A30. Continue on Great Southwest Road for 3/4 of a mile. In a quarter of a mile, take the exit towards Heathrow Airport. Take the exit towards Heathrow Airport. In quarter of a mile, keep left at the fork to continue towards Southern Perimeter Road. Keep left at the fork. In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the second exit and stay on Southern Perimeter Road. Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road. Continue on Southern Perimeter Road for 1.5 miles. quarter of a mile, at Western Perimeter Road roundabout, take the first exit and stay on Southern Perimeter Road.
Let me turn to the condition of the Liberal government. In how many seats are the Lib Dems close enough to beat the Tories at the next election, except the split of Labour support there too, if the Labour support shrunk?
Exit the roundabout onto Southern Perimeter Road. In 200 yards, at the roundabout, take the second exit onto Airport Way, A3113.
Campaign too hard, and if Labour voters decided to vote tactically, you could win that seat.
Yeah, I mean, conditions go vary across the country. I mean, if you look at what I call the blue ball seats following the Cheshire Hampshire victory, there's not much of those seats like Cheshire Hampshire where we have a really big chance. But in North Shropshire, we came from the
Exit the roundabout onto Airport Way. Continue on Airport Way for half a mile. In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the fourth exit onto the M25 slip road to M4, M40.
And together you can defeat the Conservative majority.
You say in a comparative way, as if we intend to spend money on some of those seats originally. I mean, we are very competitive against Labour in a number of councils. I mean, in this May election, I think we'll take seats off Labour in a whole range of councils across the Midlands and the North. I mean, particularly looking at Hull, going there later this week, as we're really got our tails up in Hull. Sheffield looks interesting. And in seats like Sheffield Hallam next election, trying to remove the Labour MP there. So I don't think it's all as black and white as people sometimes paint it.
Nonetheless, at the next election, it's perfectly possible that the Liberal Democrats doing better in what we call the blue collar seats, and Labour doing better in some of their traditional areas possibly.
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
And together you might be able to form some kind of government. Now my question to you is a very straightforward one. What would you want from Labour to be able to support them in the House of Commons?
Your question is a hypothetical one. You're going miles ahead. Yeah, but we're some way from the next election. What I have said is that my job seems to me is to defeat lots of Tory MPs. They're the problem causing all these crises.
And they would say just the same.
But I believe that
Continue for half a mile. In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M25. Continue on M25 for 1 mile. quarter of a mile at junction 15. Use the left lane to take the M4 exit to Reading, Slough. Use the left lane to exit at junction 15, then keep left at the fork. Keep left at the fork. Continue on M4 for 1.5 miles. In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Individuals have been handed fines over Partygate. The former Conservative Party leader has told Tonight with Andrew Marr that it is not the time for change or for Boris Johnson to resign. LBC weather mostly clear tonight with rain and sleet for southern England.
Keep right to stay on M4.
Degrees.
This is LBC.
AJ Value Invest gives you the security and control to look after your investments.
Continue on M4 for 4 miles.
Self-invested personal pension. Our investment ideas make it easy to get started. You work hard for your money, and we want it to work hard for you. So get investing in your future at youinvest.co.uk. Open an account by the 5th of April to meet the tax year deadline. AJ Value Invest does not provide advice. Capital at risk. Tax rules apply. Food's here.
Great. Starving. Right, you lot, come on in. One at a time. That's it. Pile the pieces over there. Careful, Shaz, don't drop them. You next, they'll stack them up. That's it. Pile those pieces.
Stop! What's all this?
The pieces are in for. Where's the rest of you?
What do you mean?
You said bring it up for 200 people.
Hungry. I said 2 hungry people.
Oh.
Need a hearing test? Should have gone to Specsavers. Book online today.
Where do you want the garlic bread?
Many eggs, bunch of flour, thing of milk, 5 butter, lots of sugar, some baking powder, a bit of zest, then cherries, jam, cream, splash it, dash there, whip it, oven it, ta-da! Not a cake. Amounts matter, like how much, how long, and when. Getting business right means getting just the right amount of everything, including insurance. Superscript, monthly business insurance shaped around you. With over 100 international designs, the Mazda CX-5 could have reached its peak, but that's not the Mazda way. The 2022 Mazda CX-5's improved suspension and reduced road noise create a sense of calm, while the signature Kodo design ensures every drive is beautiful. It's a driver's SUV through and through, ready for any road you choose. Search Mazda CX-5 to book your test drive. Mazda. Drive together.
This is LBC. Tonight with Andrew Marr.
The time, 6:35. It's been called the worst maternity scandal in the history of the NHS. We now know over 2 decades at Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust, hundreds of babies were left brain damaged or dead. Charlotte Lynch, LBC's reporter, is here and can tell us more. Charlotte, this is one of the worst scandals the NHS has ever seen.
That's right, it is the worst maternity scandal the NHS has seen. This inquiry discovered 201 babies and 9 mothers could have or would have survived if they'd had better care from the Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust. Repeated failures have been uncovered in this review. Over 20 years, babies born at the Princess Royal in Telford and at the Royal Shrewsbury.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Oxygen and experienced life-changing brain injuries. Some
Mothers died too.
They did. 9 mothers died. Some of them were made to have natural births, despite the fact they should have had a caesarean section. And even the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, pointing out in the Commons earlier, things like vital clinical details kept on post-it notes that were
then thrown away.
thrown into the bin, and the Health Secretary said that had tragic consequences for a baby. Now, this report also found there was a tendency of the Trust at times to blame the mothers for what had happened to them, in some cases even for their own deaths. Now, this was named the Ockenden Report after the independent midwife who led it, Donna Ockenden. It looked into almost 1,600 cases, and her team of investigators found that families were locked out of reviews where things went wrong.
So the Trust simply wasn't listening to the mothers or the families for a very long period of time, and the report also says there was a real problem with the culture right at the top of the Trust, and it was feeling down, and a toxic culture.
Absolutely. It found that some staff felt unable to raise concerns because of what it says was a culture of undermining and bullying. Now, there is a police investigation ongoing. It's looking into around 600 cases. The Health Secretary has given assurances that the people responsible for these repeated failures will be held to account. But we have had a statement from the Trust. Their Chief Executive, Louise Barnett, has apologised. She says changes have been made.
I'm sure she has. It is an unimaginably awful story. Charlotte, thanks very much indeed for now. Lucy Allen, you're the local MP here. When did you first realise that something terrible was going on at the hospital?
So in 2015, when I became an MP, there were cases that were in the local media, and I remember the very first thing I did was raise it with the Hospital Trust at a meeting, which I have to say was a meeting of only male executives and only male MPs.
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Nothing to worry about. We have this under control. Don't worry about it. Next meeting, is it on the agenda? No, it's not. So I'd raise it again.
And when did you realise quite how big this was and how far?
Exit at junction 6.
The initial inquiry in 2017 was only looking at 23 cases, and it wasn't until
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the 3rd exit onto Tuns Lane, A355.
huge numbers of cases. So I raised that in Parliament at that point, and the answer I got back from Nadine Dorries, who was then the Patient Safety Minister, was no, Lucy, it's not 600 cases, it's 900 cases, and I was utterly shocked.
Of course, now we
And
know
of
it's a
course,
lot more than that.
We now
yes.
know that it was
Now,
1,800 cases.
in all of these sort of stories, we talk endlessly and rightly about the numbers and about management and so forth, but this is about individuals, it's about mothers, it's about babies, it's about your constituents. Just give us a sense of some of the trauma that some of these people went through.
So these are young women who go into hospital hoping for a joyous time. They're at their most vulnerable. Something goes wrong. They expect to have care, compassion, and instead they're being told, you're not trying hard enough, that you should be pushing harder and you're making too much fuss. And to hear somebody
Exit the roundabout onto Tuns Lane.
devastating, and that it was happening on the scale that it was.
This is awful, and people losing their babies when they didn't need to die.
Absolutely. So I referred in Prime Minister's questions today to a constituent who begged for a caesarean section because she knew that her baby was too big, was getting stuck.
In a quarter of a mile, slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
The baby arrived, he was blue, he was floppy, and in 11 hours he died.
Awful story. I think all around the country people will be feeling for your constituents and for what happened in Shrewsbury and Telford, but all around the country they'll be wondering, could it happen here? The report says there's a problem with the culture. Every NHS trust has a different culture. But do you fear that these kind of problems may be more widespread across the NHS than we thought?
So we know from the Morecambe Bay scandal, which was similar, although not on the same scale, that there's clearly a
Slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
This particular trust, if you look at the stats, is very much an outlier. So it's a standout case. But it's inevitable that the culture that led to these instances is something that does pervade the NHS.
And this was the culture of natural birth at all costs, really.
So our trust was pushing that much harder than anywhere else. So it had a lower cesarean rate by about 10%.
Continue for 1.5 miles.
It's the culture of management being in denial, the institutional blindness to what is going
And
on.
not listening to the mothers.
And not listening to the voice of women. And I do feel that that is something that is prevalent elsewhere within the NHS. I used to be a non-executive director of an NHS trust. I do think this is something we have to tackle. We must listen to the voices of women.
Lucy Ann and Charlotte Lynch, thank you both very much indeed. Now, we're hearing today a mixed picture when it comes to Russia's pledge to reduce military action in Ukraine. Are they retreating or continuing to bombard cities like Kiev? Well, John Sweeney's a reporter and a writer who is right there. John, welcome to you. Let me ask you, first of all, if you can hear me, let me ask you first of all, that the initial report was that the Russian military was promising to withdraw from Kiev and, as it were, cease trying to assault it. And then today, there was a series of explosions heard in Kiev, and it seemed the Russians, yet again, were not doing what they'd promised to do. Just bring us up to the latest.
It's very confusing to work out what's happening, but remember, Andrew, the electricity is still on and the internet is still on, and I'm still wearing my lucky orange hat. So my sense is that Russia, and the story from Moscow was that they thought they were going to take Kyiv in 2 days, put in some awful, ghastly, quisling government, and that hasn't happened. We're day 35 now. So my feeling is that actually, yes, the Russians have lost the battle for Kyiv. It's been noisy, and a series of artillery duels, which you hear in terms of soft but frightening crumps from the centre rather than big bangs. There hasn't been, as far as I know, any big attacks on civilian targets by the Russians. So my working hypothesis, Andrew, and it's difficult to go and check this, my working hypothesis is that most of the heavy noises is from the Ukrainian army with their new ammunition they're getting from the West, thumping the Russians as they leave or as they dig in. But it is not the case that the Russians have left full stop. They are sticking and digging in. So the good news, the positive is, they're not going forwards. The bad news is they're not going backwards.
So by and large, people don't think that this is just, as it were, a convenient Russian comfort break where they go back and they restock and they prepare and then they come back again.
So, like Andrew, I'm too old to go out to the front line every day, and I don't have the right kit, and I'm freelance, so I don't have the support of a big organisation to do that. So what I do instead is look at people's faces, and I'm seeing, as I walk around the city, I walk past several big Ukrainian army bases here in Kyiv, and the officers and the soldiers, they look pretty relaxed. They're smiling, they're laughing to each other. I went to the bar where all the journalists hang out, the Buena Vista Social Club. They had the first singer, and it was kind of Ukrainian Cuban music. You can imagine how funny that can be, but it was sweet. Now, the very fact that there's
just a slight bit of hope beginning to bobble around, is that?
More than that, it's kind of, can you imagine in 1940 some kind of blues singer, a jazz singer in one of the bars in Soho singing away, and then someone says, "Oh, so I'm
think strangely I can. It must be very, very moving. Can I ask you just one other thing? There's been a lot of talk about the peace negotiations in Istanbul and the implication of what the President said to The Economist, indeed, Economist magazine, when he said he was interested in saving lives, not mere territory, that there could be some kind of agreement to cede quite a large part of the east of Ukraine to the Russians in due course. Now, given the sort of heroic fight the Russians